Triage. What I want to do today is a number of new. How many people here are new? I mean, not new. How many people were not here last week? Okay. So I'm going to just update people just to bring everyone up to speed because the issues are quite complicated, and I want to kind of maybe reach some type of conclusion based on a couple of different principles. Last week, we saw three key sources that deal with triage. What is triage? Triage essentially says we live in a world of finite resources. We need to make decisions. A government says we have X amount of money in taxes, we have X amount of money in our budgets and our gross national product. We need to allocate those resources towards helping the people. Hopefully that's the way governments think, right? So we will allocate X amount of money towards the police and to the fire and to the hospital and to whatever it need be. And how much do they put into education? How much do they put into research, which is only going to, quote unquote, pay off in 20 years, right? A new job. So all these things and streets and roads, road repair. Everything is a triage when people have a limited amount of resources. Some governments think they have limited resources, and other governments think they don't have limited resources. They just spend more money. But that's a political statement. So what we need to understand, though, is in the medical world, in the world of medicine, with finite, again, resources and doctors and beds, etc., we cannot always provide the service for everybody always. The most obvious example is, if you show up and your arm hurts you, right, you're not going to be in and out of the hospital. Because till you get seen, until you get an x-ray taken, because at the end of the day, it's not such an emergency. But things that are an emergency, hopefully, we dealt with more expediency. Now, that's all fine and dandy when it's, shall we say, extreme of, broken arm versus a gunshot wound, right? Who will get the x-ray first? What we need to understand is how do we deal with situations where everyone is in desperate need? And this gets even more complicated in a place like Israel, where, and I actually found the case online, in the winter of 2014, the Arab terrorist who actually had butchering knives, and attempted to attack a couple of Israelis, was shot and rushed to hospital and was in critical care. Yet his victims, the Israelis, were also in critical care. So Hadassah Hospital had to make a decision from a triage perspective, who do they take first? If the terrorist is in more critical condition, according to the rules of medicine, which is international, you always take the more critical victim first. Which would mean, in Israel, you'd have to deal with the terrorist, who is the person responsible for placing himself and the Israelis in critical care. So what do? I saw an interview with a head doctor who I actually know. I had no idea. He was the head of Hadassah, head of ethical whatever. His name, no, I don't really know him. His name is Dr. Sprung. His son, who must be a son, Eli Sprung, and I were in Chachbaritz together. And I knew his father was a doctor. And his father spoke a perfect English, whatever. I am willing to bet a lot of money to say that this guy, for sure, is my friend's father. Not that I've seen my friend in 20 years, but anyways. So these are very serious cases. Another case that you often see, and again, this is more common, is that for liver transplants, who gets the kidney transplant? Who gets the liver transplant, right? Finite number of resources. Many people are on the list. Who do you give it to first? Other cases where this comes up, okay, those are the biggies. Those are the biggie are transplants, showing them to a hospital. Those are kind of these are all real cases. These are not like, made up, fabricated, or impossible. These actually happen somewhat regularly. Not the Arab terrorist case. That's pretty unique, but definitely in terms of transplants, it's quite common. We saw three sources. The first source is called the water bottle case. Well, that's what I call it, the water bottle case. Two people are traveling in a desert. This is mutually exclusive. If they share the water, they both die. If one person consumes the entire water bottle, that person and only that person will survive. What do? We saw two different opinions So the opinion of Ben Petura, he said they should split it and have them both perish because one should not see the death of his friend. Rabbi Akiva says no. You are obligated, you need to drink it. And who is the person who should drink it? That is the person who owns, we explained, the person who owns the water bottle should drink the water. The other person, sorry, not having a very good day. Okay? That's what we said last week. Now, I want to go back to the source and examine it from a different perspective. One, guess what? Not everyone agrees that the person who possesses the water bottle is the person that should drink it. Who is this? So I discovered that, in fact, some great sages, like the Chazon Ish, said it has nothing to do with ownership. Nothing. Ownership should not be used to make a decision in this case. Fascinating. We said last week this is about ownership. Second, what is the rationale? And this is what I want to discuss because there's a philosophy here that at the end of the day I want to drive home. What is the philosophy of Ben Petura who says, let's split it? That seems to be ridiculous, preposterous. No one should live, they should both die? Could someone tell me, put your shoes in Ben Petura who says they should split it, they shouldn't see the death of their friend. Could you explain to me why rationally that can be justified? Can anyone come up with a philosophical, ethical argument for his position? Because otherwise, what do you mean? They should both die? Isn't that absurd? Have someone live at least. What would you argue, you of tears, from a philosophical, moral, ethical perspective, why they should both share it? What might be his rationale? And then I will share with you, if you don't say it, what the Nitziv said. Yeah?
Maybe that neither should directly cause the death of the other one.
So again, we're sharing the water bottle. So why is that more important than at least someone should survive?
Maybe that like the last deed that they do, because it's obvious that they're both going to die. The last deed that they do shouldn't be one of directly causing the death.
So be very careful. This is not direct anything. This is all indirect. Not direct. Not taking gun and killing somebody, God forbid. Right?
Also, like, how do you pick who should live? Like, it's kind of like not fair.
But it's his bottle, so
right.
He has the right.
So again, according to Ben Petura, he clearly doesn't care about possession because he says split it, right? What would be the rationale behind splitting it? What would you say? What is the moral, ethical, philosophical argument for splitting it? We are not leaving until this is thought of. Yeah. Think.
I'm thinking about the pasuk.
Stop being so frum. What? Okay. The truth is, Lotor Dam Rayacha is actually can be applied in this case. There are those who want to argue you can't stand idly by while your friend is dying.
Then you should give him.
So good. Okay. Wow. There's too many people. You're not allowed. We're over the number limit in this room. Okay. Anyone else? Good. Besides not watching, can someone give me another moral argument, which could be based on Lo Tamar Adam Rayacha? You're stuck on a little funny-looking stool.
So now
tired.
Anyone else want to argue? Can you? Let's go, people. Think. Tell me I want a moral or philosophical or both argument.
Yeah, because you're like killing your friend, but if you're not giving it to him, then you're killing him, kind of. Right? Like, let's say it's yours and you don't split it.
So, phrase it properly. Indirect killing takes precedence over
Direct. What do you mean?
saving a life. So I want to not quite say that. I want to tell you what the Nitziv says. Yeah, you want to say something?
Halachically, you're not allowed to kill. You're not allowed to not drink it if it's your water.
So it's not so simple, what I discovered. The Chazon Ish actually said under the possession. It's not so simple. Yeah.
Possession.
Right. Okay, so that's if you argue the possession. But Ben Petura clearly doesn't argue possession because he has to split it. So we want to understand is what is his rational argument. What, he's silly? He's a fool? No. So here's what I think you'd have to say. The Netziv says the following. Chayei Sha'ah, prolonging two people's life, has tremendous value. If I can prolong two people's life 6 hours, that has greater ethical, religious, philosophical, whatever word you want to use, value, then the net sum of one guy does, one guy lives. That's what the Nitziv argues. He says that maybe Ben Petura, because we don't know what's his argument, it's about Chaye, what's called Chaye Sha'ah. Has tremendous value, don't belittle it. Chaye Sha'ah is extending life a little bit. Then he goes on to say, listen to this, are you ready? What about if they have joint ownership over the water bottle? What do I mean? What would Rabbi Akiva say in a case where both of them own, how can you have joint ownership of a water bottle? They have a legal contract? No, the answer is we're going on a deal together. You bring the pretzels, which maybe isn't so good to bring to a desert, right? And I'll bring the water, which means we share in all of our stuff that we're bringing on this trip. Which means the water bottle, the fact that I'm having it on my backpack doesn't mean that I own it. It means it's both of ours. We share all of our possessions, our food, Listen to this. What would Rabbi Akiva say in a case where it was joint ownership over the water? What does Rabbi Akiva say, just to remind you? Akiva says, one person should drink, the other person should die. Guess what? If it's joint ownership water, even Rabbi Akiva argues, they should split it. Rabbi Akiva agrees with Ben Petura in a case of joint ownership of the finite resource of water. Now I want to be very, sorry. Because, and this is what the Rav Moshe Feinstein says, having a water bottle is not it's a shared resource that's splittable. Meaning, the fact that I can give a little bit that person A can drink and person B can drink means that my resource is shareable. I'm not interested, I don't know if you've studied ethics before, but there are two ways to look at ethical behaviors. There's what's called deontological and consequentialist. Do I look at the result, which is one guy dies, one guy lives? That's focusing on the consequence, which another word is teleological ethics. Or do I look at it from a this is U of T, deontological. What does deontological mean? What's the principle behind it? The principle, I don't care about the consequences. What? Deontological means it's the process. I have to take a resource, right. The means don't justify the ends. Deontological means I don't care about the end, I care about the means. And the means are, I have water, it can be shared, both are thirsty, both need it, I share the resource. This also comes up, now I remember the other case. In the world of medicine, if I have a pill, and I only have one pill, who do I give it to? Both people need the pill. Right? So this is also that comes up in, the famous Heinz dilemma?
No.
Kohlberg and Columbia University came up with the idea of nothing to do with ketchup, by the way. Heinz dilemma is the following. They ask people from a moral perspective, there's a couple, the wife is very sick, there's one guy who invented the cure, he's charging $1 million for this bottle of medicine. You're the husband, what do? You don't have $1 million. So do you steal it? Do you not steal it? Are you allowed to steal it? Can you beat the guy up? Can you steal it and pay him later? Can you steal that? So how you do with that dilemma tells you a lot about your moral compass, but not for now. But this idea of finite medicine also is a very valuable point to argue. Because Rav Moshe Feinstein argues that if you only have one pill, that's not the same as a bottle of water. Because a bottle of water is shareable. If I'm not a consequentialist, if I don't look at the result, if I can spit a bottle of water. I can't share a pill.
Why?
Okay?
Different milligrams.
He says the meaning it's not, you don't break, It's like I can't share a hospital bed. Right? I can't share a surgeon. So in a situation that I can split the resource, again, I don't look at the consequence. Maybe, and this is what people want to argue, that even Rabbi Akiva would agree, if they both own it, it's splittable. In a shareable resource, like water, you should try to share it. if they both own it. Others want to argue that if one guy owns it, he's the person that should drink it. That is more or less accepted opinion, what Jesse was saying. I was giving Jesse a hard time, but most people do argue the person that owns the water should keep it. The Chazon Ish said actually it has nothing to do with possession. It has to do with the fact that okay, let's talk about the Chazon Ish argues. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, question.
Why does Judaism take this approach? Like,
Okay.
Why do they choose that
That's a
one? over the
great question. The question is that everyone asks in Jewish ethics, is Judaism deontological or is Judaism teleological? Is Judaism look at the consequence? Tachlis, who's going to live? What are the numbers? Or the process?
Generally into the process.
Because the answer is, it's both. It's both. And that's why this is so complicated. That's why this makes it so complicated. And you'll see cases where we will get to in a minute. And so that was the first case. The second case that we spoke about last week was a very difficult Mishnah. Again, I'm talking about a text that's approximately 1,500 years old, which says things that from a modern perspective don't jive. But I'm going to tell you what it says, because it says it. And the Mishnah in source 2 says, the man comes before a woman for survival. Right? Ish kodem lisha lachayot. Right? And to return stolen property. However, when it comes to clothing, you clothe the women before you clothe the man. What about capturing people who are in jail? What do you do first? Okay? And then it goes on to say, and this is what's important, a priest comes before a Levite comes before an Israelite comes before a bastard, and it literally is a hierarchical lineage perspective, right, from top to bottom. And it concludes, however, if a bastard, and by the way, I just want to, the Jewish definition of a bastard is a person born out of wedlock where there was an affair. I mean, the mother needs to be married, not a single person who was a child. That's not a mamzer. So, he concludes, this Mishnah says, but if the guy is a bastard who's born from an inappropriate relationship, but he's a Talmid Chacham, he's a knowledgeable person, he takes precedence in terms of saving his life over the high priest who's an ignoramus. The famous statement, Mamzer Talmid Chacham v'Kohen Gadol Am Haaretz, Mamzer Talmid Chacham Kodem LaKohen Gadol Am Haaretz. Meaning, we ask people, can you please tell me how much Talmud you know? Right? What is your knowledge of the Torah world? Right? Oh, sorry. You gotta go back to line. Okay, so I'm exaggerating. That's not really true. But the question is, what is the application of this Mishnah? How do we apply this? Is it a finite resource? Is it shared resources? Is that the only thing that gets you to the front of the line? What is the context of this Mishnah? That, my friends, is going to be very important. And that's what I want to contextualize today, which I did not contextualize last week. Okay? So here we go. This is where the agreement is. Rav Moshe Feinstein, who is one of the preeminent leading rabbinical figures in New York City, in America, in the world, in the modern era. He died in the 1980s, so fairly recent. In modern medicine, not like super modern, but modern enough. He was asked this question about hospital triage. He was asked, he said, Rabbi, you mean to tell me two got in my hospital, and I have to start asking questions about lineage, and I got to ask questions about, are you kidding? That's not going to work. That's illegal. I can't do. So Moshe Feinstein says something fascinating. Listen to this. He quotes an earlier source in the 17th century, which is called the Shach. You don't have it on your sheet. Actually, I think you do. I think it's actually quoted in the Tzitz Eliezer that I gave you. There's a Shach. I'm pretty sure it's actually in here. Yeah, there it is. Hey, it's on page 2 if you want to follow along right here, 80% down. There's a Shach there. That Shach, who again wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, again a couple hundred years ago, he says, lineage today, I don't buy it. Now you need to realize something. Why does he make such a statement? We have a rule. Even a Kohen today is not 100% a Kohen. Meaning, okay, You have a tradition. Your father was a priest. Your grandfather. Fine. We'll give you the first aliyah to the Torah. Will you bless the people on the holidays? In Israel, you bless people every day. But that's because it's like... But we are not definitive about lineage today. That already goes back another few hundred years. So says the Shach, he says, listen, since lineage today isn't like 100%, just based on what's called chazaka, like most probably, when it comes to life, when it comes to, like, okay, we'll give you the first aliyah, or okay, when it comes to situation of life and death, there's no way I'm going with lineage. Because lineage isn't 100%. I don't really know. Fascinating statement already that he said a few hundred years ago. So it says of Moshe Feinstein, who's coming now and saying, lineage, I'm not certain that's the way to make decisions. And then he says, besides, there's something which takes precedence over lineage. And this becomes very important. It's called first come, first serve. In translated English, is first come, first serve. Right? And he says that the Mishnah in Hurriyat is talking about a case that's 1 in a million. Meaning, you're a doctor, and this is what Rav Moshe Feinstein said. He writes this in number 6, where I say the word practical. Practical. Right? He gives a following case. A person comes to the hospital. Let's call someone old, 95 years old, their 7th heart attack, bad news, like it's not good. And they started operating on this news. They started doing tipulin. They started doing treatment. An hour later, in the middle of the various surgeries and operation procedures, there's someone comes in who's a 20-year-old who was just shot by a gun. Hey, it's New York City, right? Okay? He was asked, listen, this 95-year-old guy, we're wasting our time. We're wasting our time. He's not going to live. And even if he lives, he has a week, he has a month, he has an hour. It's a limited amount of time. Come on. Let's go deal with this 20-year-old guy, a couple surgeries, we'll extract the bullet, we'll do da-da-da, and he'll be okay. Or at least he's a much greater chance to survive. He's 20. Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked what to do. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what do? So, the definition is the first guy is what's called Chayei Sha'ah, which is extending life, an hour, a minute, a week, a month, 6 months. The second one is you're saving this guy's life. Most probably. What do? Do you say, surgery operating team, just walk away? Let's go deal with this guy? After all, he's 20 years old. How could you not? What do you think? Did you take a vote?
It was just Chayei Shah versus one or the other?
Yeah. First one is Chayei Shah. The guy's 95 years old.
Anytime, extra time counts.
And extra time counts, but at the end of the day, it's under...
You've already started operating on him?
He's in the operating table, yeah.
Wait, and if you don't stop and go to the other one's gonna die? Like the 20-year-old's gonna die?
Okay, let's read. Number 6. What are you asking me for? Read the case. It's actually interesting. This was actually asked by the great Rav Mordechai. This is actually a Sephardic rabbi who asked this. Mordechai Leo asked this question. Moshe Feinstein, who's unfortunately, he says called him Shlita, but he's passed away since. So the title of this in number 6 is Ma Nechshav Chayei Sha'ah. What is considered extending life? Linyan Hakdamat Choleh, in terms of taking someone in priority for who's sick. L'urfato Chayei Olam, to give someone for sure life. So again, person A is extension of life. Person 2 is life or death. That's the case. No one ever asked me what I think, right? You ask these questions to the big guys out there. What do? So he says, okay, the introduction is, what do? And he says, second line, Yesh lefanenu shnei cholim. You have 2 people who are sick. Ushneim afshar shitrapu b'derech hateva. Both could, become healthy. They could live. Mimachloket achrut shira lehem, because of their sickness. Yesh la'akdim hacholeh sheshayach shitrapeh sheyichyeh yoter mishaneh shehu lo yoter mishana shehu lo avad chizkat chayim shelo mecholeh acher שלפי דת הרופאים לא יחיה יותר משנה שבחשיבות טרפה לרופאים. So I gotta be careful. He actually didn't talk about our case. He said 2 people showed up at the hospital at the exact same time. What do you deal with? So he says, then he gets into our case. Sorry. The first case is 2 people showed up at the exact same time. One guy has less than a year to live. One guy, we can do a lot with him. He says, or Moshe Feinstein says, you deal with the person who can live longer than a year, according to medical opinion. Then he goes and talks about our case.
Where does he get that from?
Here. Where does he get that from? It's an excellent question. That's what everybody asks on this Rav Moshe. Where does he get that from? Rav Moshe Feinstein says, I use it based on logic. Because he says that in our case, when it's a finite resource, so he says like this, the water bottle case is talking about a situation which is not a finite resource, or because you can split with the water, and he says the person who's in possession of the water maybe should be dealt with first, should live, it's his water, but a hospital is not the same thing, because a hospital is a third party. So it's not Reuven, it's not George who's holding the life in his hands, or the other guy who got shot. It's a third party. What does a third party do? So our water bottle cases of Moshe Feinstein is not talking about a hospital case. Because a water bottle case is between X and Y. Whereas this hospital case is dealing with Z, is making a decision. X and Y are not making decisions about their own situation. They can't, they're incapacitated. So therefore we revert to 1. If it's the exact same time, who has a better chance to live? And especially if the prognosis is less than a year. Again, the definition of a treifa, everybody, is something that's not going to live another year. That's both a human definition and an animal definition, although people use the word treif to mean not kosher. That's actually an incorrect usage of the word. That's colloquial, but that's not what it means. So, and he says if this thing is going to die, if this person will die within a few years, go to the other person. Then he goes on to say, but in the case that I originally started with, you don't leave that 95-year-old patient. Why? Because he says, the moment you deal with somebody, you have to finish dealing with them. If they come in at the same time, which again, the odds are quite slim, if they come at the exact same second, then who's more likely to live? But once you start working on somebody, that's where you're obligated to heal and to help. And then to dump them for somebody else, but Moshe Feinstein says you're not allowed to do that. And in fact, he even says, and this is what he was asked, does that mean they're on the operating table? What about if they just check in? And Rav Moshe said, even checking in is considered, we need to deal with you first. You've checked in first. Sounds like a hotel terminology, right? You've, there's a term, signed in, whatever it is.
Been admitted.
Admitted, thank you. Admitted that, that's the term. You admitted to the hospital first. Us, as a hospital, we are obligated to deal with now. If it's an extreme situation where a guy breaks his arm, okay, that's one thing, right? But if they're both very serious, then it's first come, first serve. That is how Rabbi Moshe Feinstein deals with triage in hospitals. So, everyone asked, what about lineage? He said, no. First come, first serve takes priority over lineage. And seriousness of sickness takes priority over lineage. Lineage, at the end of the day, Moshe Feinstein, doesn't really apply so much. Maybe it applies in various charity cases. Now he says that's where perhaps it can be applied much more. Okay, questions?
What's the source? Sorry.
For Moshe Feinstein? Rav Moshe Feinstein
It just
combines.
sounds like far-fetched, like,
We don't have everything
all
here.
of
right?
it.
No, this is a gigantic. So Rav Moshe
Usually
Feinstein
it has to
decides.
come from somewhere.
Right. Okay. He argues that the Mishnah and the Gemara are saying what he says, and he proves it the following. He's assuming that when you talk about lineage and status, it can't be that someone comes first. Because he says that when you deal with someone first, that takes priority. Because they're in front of you. Mashish lefanenu. That's what he says. That if you're dealing with somebody, that's who you deal with. He's arguing the context of the Mishnah is arriving at the exact same time, equal needs. The treifa thing is a very big deal. Not everyone agrees with him. I believe that Tzitz Eliezer disagrees. I didn't have time to double check. Who's a great rabbi who also passed away not long ago in Jerusalem. He was the chief rabbi of medical ethics in Shaarei Tzedek, right? Hospital. Who wrote many, hundreds of articles on this topic of medical ethics. And he wasn't so sure with this response by Moshe Feinstein that you deal with the person who's going to live longer, and not the person who's quote unquote a treifa. He wasn't so happy with that. I don't know. I have to look into it a little bit more. But you ask a very good question. What's the source? And the truth is, Rav Moshe says I'm using the great thing about Rav Moshe was very creative. He often did not have sources. He was very creative in a lot of his responses. Again, the answer he says is very simple. Triage of lineage is only when it's the same time. Anything else? I got to go to.
Everything else is also the same, right?
Right.
It's sort of like the last.
He says that's the last bottom resort. Yeah.
Let's say like the hospital's rule is to go for the younger person first. Like in your doctor, do you go with the hospital's rule or you go with this?
So what's interesting this is a really important question. Is that so? The rule actually in modern day hospitals is that you do go with the person who's more likely to live. So I'll give you a simple example. If a person is 75 years old, they're not getting a kidney transplant. They're not getting a new liver. It's not going to happen. Unless, if a family member says, take my kidney, I want to give it to my grandfather. In America, it's money. America is maybe a little bit different. Is it true?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it is.
Was that movie?
Yeah?
Find one.
So,
Your name's on the hospital, odds are you'll somehow get a kidney.
right, okay. Look, by the way, even in Canada, let's be honest, if the Prime Minister, either the former, the current, the elected, it doesn't matter, shows up to a hospital, they're getting better service. Like, it's just a fact. So, you know.
There's a thing in the States called physician assistant. I don't know what it's called actually.
What do you mean?
It's where you get it for free.
Oh no. Pro bono?
No.
What? What do you mean? You're biased because your dad's a doctor in the States. So
Yeah, it's called
look, this is a very... What makes it complicated is that we know... Go back to a liver case or a heart transplant. At the end of the day, there has to be a list, and the medical world needs to make a decision who should get that heart, who should get those eyes, they have to make the decision, and that goes on need. It doesn't necessarily go by who's on the list first, because you can get bumped up on a list if you're in more serious condition. We know that.
But according to halacha, it should be going based on.
It should be who gets there first.
Like if the hospital was based on Jewish law,
It appears that unless the person. So here's the issue: if a person won't live for a year, no, it's not true. You're right. When it comes to kidneys and transplants, it could be we should go by first come first serve.
No.
Unless you're going to argue that
They deteriorate.
They deteriorate. See, chayesha, prolonging a little bit of life versus extended period of life, we see is only if they show up at the exact same time. Yeah, it's not so simple when it comes to that. Now, a person can say, even I think this is possible, a person is allowed to volunteer to donate their kidney for a certain person, and only for that person. I think they can do that for a kidney. Anyone correct me on that?
Sounds awful.
I think so.
For kidney.
Or liver.
Well, yes,
No.
because otherwise you're
Why?
dead.
Otherwise you're dead.
Like, I
Right?
don't think you can put on your urban donor card, I only want like my relatives.
No, I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah,
On the other
kidney
side,
or
you
liver.
can step forward and say my kidney's for that person.
Yeah. I'm not allowed, I mean, not if I die, but you can live without a kidney.
Yeah.
So you can say my kidney is for my grandfather, and if you're not giving the grandfather, then I'm not giving my kidney. Yeah, I think you can do that for a kidney.
Yeah.
You can't say take my heart for my grandfather because that's murder. So, okay. So, what is let's go back to philosophy for a minute. If that's true, is Rav Moshe Feinstein focusing on deontological ethics or teleological ethics? Meaning, does he care about consequences or does he care about the process?
Process. Clearly the process.
Explain.
The consequences could be totally in their favor. Like,
Because he doesn't care how much like
Chance
the
of life.
20-year-old will live longer.
Okay, so if he's arguing that it's all about first come, first serve, then you're right. However, he has a dimension of consequences as well. How? If two people show up at the exact same time, you give it to the person who's going to live longer, that's consequential. So we even see, and you're going to see this, by the way, in many cases where they're forced.
That doesn't make him consequential. That just means when the process is tied, you have to go.
Oh, you're right, because you're saying deontologically there's no solution here. When there's no solution, I go, right, exactly, move on. Right, fine, you're right. Perhaps that's a more correct way of saying it. Okay. So it's really interesting to see now how you evaluate and what takes priority in these different cases. So I saw. Let me just double check something. Hang on, I wrote something down. Okay. When it comes to, let's say, I don't have a pill, but I have a cup of medicine, or I have a syringe of medicine. Really, according to the vast majority of Jewish scholars, they say split the medicine with these two people, even though all it's going to do is prolong their life, and eventually both will die. Not to give it all to one person. Why? Because this goes back to the argument of the water bottle case, where when there's a third party, or when there's joint ownership, it needs to be shared. So we limit the argument between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura only to the case where one person owns it. Otherwise, everyone agrees with Ben Petura that it gets split.
So in a case like...
That's very radical. That's usually not modern-day medicine. Because modern-day medicine often focuses on consequences.
What's the difference between a pill and...
A pill, you can't really split a pill.
Right.
Half a pill usually does nothing. That's what they...
It's different than splitting like a drinkable medicine?
Yeah, drinkable medicine use like a syringe where they can like divide it. Yeah, again, I guess it's the medicine that actually can have an effect on you for a couple hours. That's it.
Or I was thinking like blood. Like if you have two people that need the same type of blood and you only have like a limited amount of it, you're
right.
supposed to split it between the two of them. But like, that basically means that both of them won't be able to survive their surgery or whatever it is that they need the blood transfusion for. Would that be the same thing as water?
Is that the same as the water?
Well, it's splittable. It's
the same thing as
shareable.
all the other cases. Where
That it's splittable. You can split the water. You can split the blood.
Both won't survive, or both.
Both won't survive.
Yeah, but you have a third party administering the blood.
So they have to do it to both patients.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a really interesting one, which is not organ transplant. So the Beit Yosef, and with this I guess I'll wrap up because it's almost 1 o'clock. The Beit Yosef says, if you're swimming in an ocean, you can only save two people. People are drowning, and you're swimming, you're out there in the ocean, in the water, and you can only save one or two people. You save the person that's closest to you. He also says closest to you from a family perspective, if it's your relative, and also closest to you from a distance perspective. Meaning you don't have enough time physically to go out, or to go out there to bring one guy back and then go get the second person. You don't have that time. They'll drown or physically or whatever it is, right? So he says you say the first person if it's your family member, he actually says you have a greater obligation to save your family member over a total stranger. And he even goes as far to say, and what about if it's even? 50-50? In terms of distance, family, or they're both total strangers? Then in theory, which is not very practical, you can go according to their lineage. But that's going to be quite difficult. Are you a Kohen? No, sorry. That's not going to be very practical in most of the cases. You know what I mean? But that's what he says what you do.
What if the person tells you to save the other person first?
You're allowed to... Okay, so there are cases, this is a famous case, I spoke this a few years ago. There was a boat that left, and if you want, I can send you the names later. There's a boat that escaped Europe on its way to Palestine in 1944 and 1945. It was attacked by the British. This is not uncommon. Those are familiar with a bit of the history of Israel. And the ship went down. A guy took two of his children and started swimming with them out to the shores by Jaffa, to the water. But he physically couldn't do it. And so this is a true story. I saw this documented in a book that I could show you in Hebrew. And he turned you're going to laugh, turned to his daughter and said, I'm sorry, you're younger and you're a female. I'm saving the 11-year-old boy. I'm going to let you go. True story. She said, no way, Dad. I'm not letting you let me go. And she didn't allow him to break free.
And they both drowned.
And no, all three made it in the end, and they needed therapy. No, just how do you deal with that? But that was like a famous case where they had this father. This is a crazy situation where the father made a decision. And they actually made it to Palestine. The whole story that happened. But in the end, everyone made it. So in the end, it works out very well. Yeah. So okay, there's a lot to talk about here, and I think I just want to conclude, and I think this is quite important. And this is what makes Jewish ethics very important. It's not arbitrary. Meaning, you don't just flip a coin. You don't just do one, any money, money, mo. She loves me not, to make these decisions. And I think that is where the Jewish ethics comes into perspective, is not everyone might agree on always the process, but everyone agrees there's a process to make this decision making, especially when it comes to lies, but even when it comes to who gets charity. And I think they're all trying to use Jewish values and Jewish principles to kind of guide and weave themselves through these very difficult situations. Maybe only have to make decisions out of blessing and goodness and joy, and not out of very difficult and painful situations. Thank you.